I would like to warmly welcome you to this panel focused on the U.S. Space Force, building the first digital service. A pivotal topic aligned to this year's theme, accelerate and innovate, actualizing the nation's need for dominant air and space forces. My name is Doug Raaberg. I'm the Air Force Association's Executive Vice President and honored to serve as your panel moderator. As the first Chief of Space Operations, General Jay Raymond has noted, our new Space Force is the first military service born in the digital age. He's called for digital fluency as a prerequisite for the success of the Space Force. Today, we'll cover the strategic and operational implications of digital transformation to counter the growing threat, particularly from China and Russia in the warfighting domain of space. Please welcome my guests. Major General Kim Crider, Chief Technology and Innovation Officer, U.S. Space Force. And Major General DeAnna Burt, Commander, Combined Force Space Component Command for the Unified Combatant Command, U.S. Space Command. And she is also the Deputy Commander of Space Operations Command, U.S. Space Force. Let's kick this off. General Crider, would you please set the stage for us? You're responsible for strategy development, long-range plans, and ConOps to ensure the U.S. Space Force employs the most effective capability to the combatant commanders. So tell us what a digital service means from an organized, trained, and equipped perspective. General?
Thanks, Doug. And thanks so much for the opportunity to be here today and to share this panel with my good friend, Major General DeAnna Burt. This is really a great opportunity, and we look forward to talking about this topic, which, as you mentioned, is so important to our chief. It's so important to our service. It's so important to our nation. So let me set the stage a little bit. Being a digital service, it's really about doing what we do, preserving freedom of action, ensuring joint lethality and effectiveness, and providing independent options in, from, and through space for our nation and for our allies in a way that creates maximum value and competitive advantage. That's what we're talking about to the joint warfighters who employ and use space capabilities every day. So what do I mean by that specifically? Well, Doug, look, space operations encompass several critical missions that our security and our prosperity as a nation rely upon. Global SATCOM, position navigation and timing, missile warning, the protection and defense of those assets from any potential threat, whether they be kinetic or non-kinetic, has to be enabled by robust, responsive, and resilient domain awareness, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and command and control. Space is an immense domain, and I'm sure that General Burt's going to talk about this. It's highly congested and it's contested. So to maximize the value and competitive advantage we can create as we operate in, from, and through the domain and with other domains, we have to optimize our operators' full understanding of what's happening in the domain at any time, their effective use of intelligence, and their flexible decision speed to determine best options to assure space services are always available when and where they're needed. So the best way we think to do that is by maximizing our access and use of all domain data, the ability to apply advanced analytics to speed up and refine our ability to decision and decide and discern, to leverage automation, to enable secure machine-to-machine communications, and eliminate those manual cumbersome processes that just slow us down. And we have to do that throughout our entire service, certainly in operations, but also in our headquarters staff functions, in our workforce training and development, and in how we design, engineer, build, test, deliver, operate, and sustain capabilities. As a service, we've organized ourselves to be lean and agile. 16,000 people strong, that's about a third the size of the United States Coast Guard. And we need to be able to optimize the efficient flow of products and services to our operators. We're building combat development teams to drive rapid innovation in day-to-day operations. And we're also developing skilled product management teams that are going to integrate and scale those innovations, both in our current and in our future operations. And we're giving every Guardian, military and civilian, access to modern digital learning platforms to upskill their competencies in the very technologies that we're equipping them with. These are the ways that we are building a digital service, Doug. This is what we think it means to be competitive and to add value in today's highly contested and congested environment.
Thank you. I think that's a tremendous start, especially as we define a new digital service perspective. So General Burt, you're the space component commander to a lot of combatant commanders. So would you now open the aperture and give us the broader operational context, how you employ the capabilities of a digital service force provider to dominate space by defending our space assets and defeating hostile actions? General?
You bet, sir. Thank you, General Raaberg. I'm not on. Okay, yes, I am. Okay, my box didn't light up by technology. I love it. No, thanks, General Raaberg. I appreciate it. I would tell you that how everything Kim talked about is critical to what we do to enable the operators. We need to work within the speed of the enemy's decision cycle and ours to move quickly and fast. And the only way you do that is through having the data available to quickly move and evolve as the enemy votes. So we talk about capabilities. A lot of our historical capabilities have been very hardware-based. General Crider and the team at the service staff are trying to get to a software-based platforms that would allow us on the fly as the enemy changes or there are threats to the system, we can quickly evolve that. So we need those kinds of digitally fluent operators on our ops floor, our supracoders, making that happen right with us on the ops floor. Data is critical. As General Crider mentioned, I am a joint officer working in United States Space Command. General Dickinson's AOR is 100 kilometers to infinity per the UCP. That's a lot of data. That's a lot of things to track. Make sure you understand the domain. You have the space picture and space domain awareness. All of that is leveraged and done through the data that's coming to us for what we call the Unified Data Library. So how we do that domain awareness and how we pull in that data and use it in a way that creates decision quality data for decision makers like General Raymond and General Dickinson is going to be critical moving forward. The speed of what we pass to the other combatant commands, our American way of life and American way of war depend on space effects that are and data that needs to flow to their combatant commands, as well as into their op centers to make decisions at their levels on what targets to bomb. Is GPS accurate? Do I have my military satellite communications? All of those things. The digital work enables all of that and allows us to fluently pass that information back and forth quickly in trusted data that they can rely on and know to make decisions that that data is secure. So for us as operators, that's critical. Data is our lifeblood, and how we pass information from one command to the other and how we support them is important. I think as we move forward, having software-based not only receivers, ground-based systems, and satellite-based systems gives us the best flexibility to respond. I know that's very different than systems that were built in the industrial age, where we really built stovepipe hardware systems. In this case, now we're talking about software-driven capability, and that is a shift in the information age and how you do that. I think our enemies are also going to be very tuned in to that we use data and how critical it is to us, because we've seen the cyber threats that are there. So as an operator, the other side of this is the mission defense teams and how we create the capability to defend all the assets that we have as we move to this digital age is going to be important, because as you open up all that capability, you also open up vulnerabilities as well. So we have to be working both sides of that problem to make sure that we're covering down. I would also say this is not just a space challenge. Every domain is working this. We are heavily engaged with General Crider's leadership in Air Battle Management System, ABMS, and in JADC2, because all of us is a multi-domain fight. Space doesn't fight alone. We fight with commercial coalition and with our ally, our multi-domain partners. So having the data from across the domains in one common operational picture, and to be able to do that, that's enabled by the digital age and data coming from across all of those domains. So it's an exciting time. There's a lot of work to do. I can tell you I am a product of the digital university courses that General Crider set up for us. Old dogs, new tricks sometimes is a little more difficult than others. I can now at least understand what the cloud is. But I think it's really not about the older generation or as a senior leader. I think my job is just to enable them, put the products in their hands. And we've seen young Guardians do incredible things on the ops floor, and seen many times when given the opportunity to code and do things at the tactical level, they have increased and improved processes down from things that took us days to process to in hours. So I can give you an example. We have right now, SpaceX is launching all of these mega constellations. We had a young operator on the ops floor who was a coder and found a way to create a program that took a lot of the tracking data that we had and was able to bring it down. Something that took us days to do now takes us in the matter of about 4 to 6 hours, depending on the size of the launch. And that's a big deal to start getting all of those capabilities cataloged and out there in the space picture for future capabilities and to avoid conjunctions or collisions with other assets out there. So it's been critical. We know it's continuing to grow, and we're really excited where we're going.
Yeah, there's so many examples of that kind of innovation that Joan Burt's talking about. And that's really how we are accelerating our operations and getting that kind of advantage that I mentioned. I'm really glad she mentioned Digital University. Maybe we'll talk about a little bit more, but as I said before, everybody in the Space Force has access to Digital University, and everybody in the Space Force is encouraged to develop their digital competencies, because we really want all of our Guardians to be empowered to solve problems on their own. As Joan Burt talked about, to take those problems that today can take, days to resolve and get them solved in hours, if not minutes and seconds. We want our Guardians to be inspired and confident that they can deliver on their own ideas, that they can come up with new solutions on their own. As a small service, we can afford no less. Every Guardian is a force multiplier to the missions at hand, and we're committed to giving them the tools and the environments and the competency development means to take advantage of that.
Yeah, good point of emphasis. We're talking about the largest warfighting domain. So for each of you, what is your biggest challenge, especially in maintaining a digital force? And I'll throw that right back at you, General Crider, but General Burt, you're dealing with an operational aspect too. So I want to come back to you and tap you on the operational challenge you see with a digital force. So General Crider.
Yeah, let me start from a force provider perspective, and I'll be really curious to what General Burt has to say about this thought. But from my perspective, the biggest challenge we have is that digital really is a new way of thinking. It's a new way of operating. It's not just about the technology. In fact, it starts with the notion of value creation and empowerment. And it really requires breaking old mental models, freeing ourselves to think a little differently, focusing on the customer, focusing on the user, focusing on who is actually going to use that product or service that they're being delivered. It requires us to apply new concepts like agile methods, user-centered design, flexibility, openness to diverse perspectives, continuous learning versus prescriptive top-down driven solutions, integrating bottom-up innovation as we talked about before, and really finding that balance and flow that we need in our operations, because we're willing to try new things and we're willing to integrate new things and we're willing to continuously evolve from those new things. That's what digital gives us, and that's what digital is all about, but it's hard. It's a hard shift to open ourselves up, but once we do it, we see so many advantages.
General Burt.
No, I absolutely agree with Kim. I think it's really important to recognize this isn't just about technology. It's a cultural change across the board. Industrial age systems, as many of our services were born from after World War II and evolved. I mean, many have been around well since our nation's birth and before, but they've all been built over time, very hardware-based, very industrial-based. The pyramid structure, right? You have full rank and structure in the military. You have a certain way that decisions are made and up and down the chain. What we do now in an information age is blow that concept up, because now you have to flatten the organization. You have to give power to the lowest level. The people who are sitting there on top of the issue need to be able to fix it. And the digital age allows you to do that if you have the folks trained and capable of doing it. So from sustaining the force, it's really this training aspect, getting folks the right level of training as they come in, and so that every Guardian understands their part in this and how they can go after problems, and empowering them to innovate. and not having to have so many levels of bureaucracy to go through to get an approval to do that. And that is so different than our military structure that we've had for hundreds of years. So I think it's going to require leadership. I think that's our biggest role for Kim and I, is to enable that and to reinforce it. You can imagine the first time that a general officer or senior officer steps forward and goes, nope, can't do that. You have this paper and that paper to fill out in triplicate. The young guardian's going to say, well, okay, we're right back to what we were doing before. So it's going to take a lot of patience and leadership to look at ourselves and police ourselves as leaders to make this happen and enable it. And I think the guardians are ready. The youngsters, I mean, as we've said, we could sit here, Kim and I could both give you tons of examples where they're ready. And they come to the table with lots and lots of ideas. I think some places where we've also created operational enclaves to make it work better are things like Catalyst Campus out in Colorado Springs. We have an AFWorks-like facility. We've been working very heavily with AFWorks. I think having those pods of people that can show you the art of the possible helps build trust with leadership who may not be totally on board yet, but it also lets the young folks get into a place where they can actually integrate with both commercial and coalition and find new solutions to things. And then we onboard them very quickly. The other piece of this, and I say this, is going to be the acquisition side of the house. So when you go from a hardware-driven system, it's really hard acquisitionally to change to now software-driven, because now you're in DevSecOps, you're rotating very quickly, and there's a heavy operator involvement in that from day one. We've always talked about in the Air Force about combined developmental tests and operational tests. I think even more so in the digital age, and as we do software-driven capabilities, you have to do more and more of that, and it's the lifeblood. And as Kim talked about, how do you work with the customer? And every time coming back to as the product team, back to the customer of, does this meet your requirements? And knowing 100% is never going to get solved. You're going to keep iterating and building on that. And so again, it's a whole different acquisition way of doing business. The acquisition community has typically made money on the hardware, both in the space business anyway, on the ground system, the satellite, and the receiver. Well, if we go to software driven rather than hardware driven, now we're going to go to a common ground system, a common satellite chassis, and a common receiver. And now really where the money and the change happens is in the software. Again, that's a different mindset in the acquisition community. So again, you can see why we needed a Space Force and a service to get after this, because it's across the board culture, from the operations to the acquisitions to how we do business. It absolutely is a watershed across the board.
Joe, Burt, I'm going to stick with you because the Space Force as a force provider is definitely moving forward rapidly in innovation and thought. But I'm going to ask a simple question, because I think our audience really wants to know, when you now are out there in the operational world and people really see a warfighting space guardian, what's really the difference in the creative mindset of an operator warfighter in the execution of digital capabilities from that of a force provider? So let me start with you, General Burt, because I think this is an important part. What is that difference that they're going to see now and have been seeing over the last year plus?
I think it's an inquisitiveness. I think it's an ability to look at their service brothers and sisters in a multi-domain fight and to try to understand, as Kim said, well, who is the customer? What combat effect from space am I trying to provide to the customer? We've done that for many years. Since Desert Storm was our first space war, we've been providing combat space effects in support of the other domains. Now we also have to think about, with the enemies that are on orbit in the domain, how do we also use our digital fluency to protect ourselves? And how do we look at ways to better do our missions and be more resilient now that there are threats on orbit, not just terrestrial threats? So I think what you're going to see from Space Guardians that are out in the field are they're going to look for ways to be resilient through the digital processes. They're going to look for ways to make sure their data is fully machine to machine and involved with the combatant commanders as they provide it. It doesn't always require a human. As Kim said, we're looking really hard at where do we have our guardians placed, because every one of them is very valuable. And how can we have machines and artificial intelligence and other ways to help us streamline where we have people and having the brain power in the right place. So I think as we move forward, how we force present to the other combatant commands may be different. They may be smaller footprints, but they're still going to be just as mighty, because they're coming with all that data and all that digital technology that we haven't had in the past as a service. And so I think there's ways to do that. What we cannot do in all of this transition though is lose our fluency of multi-domain operations and what the other services, the coalition, and our commercial partners need. And again, it's that customer focus of what you are providing, I think that the digital culture absolutely gives us.
So General Crider, what does this creative mindset look like from the force provider aspect?
Yeah, I think DeAnna hit a lot of it on the head too, because you pull it all the way back, right, to the force provider that's really enabling that warfighter, that force presenter. And it really is that inquisitiveness, that thinking about what they do a little bit differently, that idea of who am I delivering this to? We really want our force providers to have the mindset of the operator warfighter in execution. We want them to understand what those operator warfighters need, how to communicate with them, to iterate solutions with them as a vital part of that force provider set of processes. As DeAnna mentioned, to get in and do DevSecOps, right? And think about how these capabilities that we're building and that we're engineering are in fact going to perform in operations, in the operational production environment. What does that look like? And to be able to think through that early and throughout the entire process with models, right? Model-based systems engineering is a big part of what we're bringing forward as we advance and accelerate innovation across the Space Force. In order to really understand how we're going to capitalize on technology and capitalize in the domain, we have to think through and model what it looks like, what the threat looks like, what our optimum blue force capabilities will be, not just space capabilities, but as DeAnna mentioned, joint all domain capabilities, and how we're going to make the most of all of those joint all domain capabilities to assure space is always available, space is always ready to deliver those services. So model-based systems engineering gives us a great way to do that, and a great way to kind of have that warfighter mindset as we think through our engineering processes and we think through the software that DeAnna mentioned that we're developing and delivering. And we also want folks to have that in their day-to-day headquarters functions too. As a small service, right? It's not certainly, warfighting operations and how we deliver that to be more effective is critical, given the contested nature of the domain. But we're a small service. We have to be able to put our best foot forward, have to be able to argue our position in a very large bureaucracy. We've got to be able to leverage data. We've got to be able to leverage analytics. We've got to be able to think about what that warfighter needs and articulate that as the force provider when we're fighting the battles in the halls of the Pentagon. So really having that mindset, really being on the edge of our seats at all times and kind of thinking hard on how we ensure the best optimum set of services and capabilities that we can afford are built into our investment plans, our S&T strategies, our capability development initiatives in partnership with our joint partners and the joint staff is all of what it's about and all of the mindset that we want folks to have.
Hey, Doug, the only thing I would add to General Crider's point, we spend a lot of time on this. We spent a lot of time so far talking about what space is going to do for everyone else. I also want everyone to understand that as an operator, every space problem does not require a space answer. There may be other domains who can come to bear and be brought to bear to solve some of our operational concerns. And we want to leverage their data and we want to leverage their information, which is why we've been so aggressive and supportive of ABMS and JADC2, because we see the value of also being able to connect to their data and their information that will help us quickly target and do things in a multi-domain environment. So I think sometimes we get very fixated on what is space doing for space and other people. Also, let's talk about what we need other people to help us do as well. And I think this whole digital flattening and sharing of data is absolutely what is needed for the pace of war that we see coming in the future with a near peer competitor.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Space is inherently an all-domain endeavor. Space depends on every other domain, and every other domain depends on space. And as we've shown in the work that we've done in participating in the Advanced Battle Management System on-ramps, we need to be able to leverage data from other sensors in order to maximize domain awareness and protection, not only of our assets, but of other assets. Space has to be a supported and a supporting domain. And we can only do that if we can operate as part of an all-domain, joint all-domain force. And we're seeing that the benefits of that in spades.
Perfect. So let me hook that thought and take it right into the joint, because that's what I keep hearing from you both. Joint all-domain, command and control, operations, and so forth. So, Spice, how are you actually leveraging those other service inspirations, maybe their ideas, and incorporating those both in your warfighting aspect, but also, let's say, in your force providing hat as well?
On the joint side, I mean, we absolutely have coalition and commercial partners and joint partners who sit day to day on our ops floor with us. And so we're all tackling the problems together, and all of those operators are empowered to work towards these problems. When we play, we particularly are in ABMS and JADC2, we've played in every vignette. We've brought forward tactical problems that we wanted solved or looked at, and we've been able to take problems that we really didn't have the data worked out. We knew we had data in stovepipes, but how did we put that together? One particularly is when we do space domain awareness with a unified data library. One of our biggest concerns is sharing with our allies and partners. How do we put all of the data from unclassified to the highest levels into a single picture to be able to show what is in the domain and what is operating? That becomes the bedrock, excuse me, becomes the bedrock of everything we do, from operations, of pattern of life, intent, what we see the enemy or others doing, and how we're operating, even just norms of behavior operating in space. So this data is feeding for the joint and coalition partners and commercial partners on the ops floor, how we operate, setting that transparency in the domain. Again, we don't want a war that extends into space, but if one does, we need to be able to fight and win. And all of this data enables the joint team to see what is going on in the domain and execute as required. So I think there's many examples of where we're going to continue to do this. Sensor to shooter, how do we put things together both with our joint partners from the missile warning side of the house? How do you take that information and feed it directly to a missile defense asset? And how do we continue to improve that over time? There's numerous examples of how we're working this in the joint world. And I think JADC2 and ABMS offer us those opportunities to have sandboxes where we can play together and think about how we would put the data to play and then quickly onboard it onto the ops floor. So we're working to get ABMS across not only our headquarters command center there in DC, but here in the CSPOC. We work with C2BMC and a variety of systems that we're working through with both the National Space Defense Center and the Combined Space Operations Center. Things like Scoop, another chassis-based platform that would have applications that allow us to fly different constellations and to do different capabilities. So I think it's all slowly but surely coming online, and we're really starting to leverage the data and capability across the joint force.
Yeah, and let me put another quick spin on that, if I could, Doug.
Please.
From a force provider perspective, and as a young service, kind of looking at this with fresh eyes, right? One of the things that I've noticed is that, you know, every service sees the world a little bit differently based on the nature of the problems that they're trying to solve. And we can, and we have, and we do learn a lot from our other service partners. When you think about the Army, right? The Army is all about operations at scale with many, many endpoints. Mm-hmm. So how do you really take advantage of that? And how do we think about scaling, you know, our operations and ensuring that our services can meet those many, many endpoints at scale when we're thinking through how do we fundamentally deliver that? The Navy constrained by bandwidth, you know, constrained bandwidth environments, having to operate, you know, out in disconnected environments. And what does that tell us? And how do we ensure that not only we can deliver services to them, but if we find ourselves constrained, how do we optimize the way in which our force is going to be able to manage its bandwidth, manage its delivery of services, and with the help of the other services that have developed those kinds of practices and processes. Marine Corps Soft, you know, they're all about rapid innovation, edge capabilities. Again, disconnected operations, a lot we can learn there as we build in our own rapid innovation processes. And then of course our sister service, right? The Air Force. And we all have grown up in the Air Force as we've launched into this new service. But if there's anything we've learned from, you know, our experience as airmen before we became Guardians, is that, you know, air power is really about dealing with many diverse simultaneous problem sets. It's about rapid sortie generation. It's about complex kill chains and accelerated OODA loops. a lot there that we're rolling into our own space operations. I'm sure General Burt can attest to this in thinking about, how do we accelerate the OODA loop? How do we do the things that she mentioned in terms of leveraging all domain data with all of our partners, commercial, allied, coalition, partners that are giving us, and joint partners that are giving us more and more access to more and more data. How do we leverage that so that we can accelerate our own OODA loop, so that we can turn faster, and create those dilemmas against our adversaries? So really thinking about what these joint partners bring and how these joint partners address their own problem sets helps us kind of think through how we're going to maximize the effectiveness of the solutions we're going to deliver in support of them, but how we can also turn around and think about how space needs to be supported, the kinds of similar problem sets that we face, and how we can continue to evolve and tune our own operations.
This is great. So what I'm hearing in the joint arena is a digital kill chain that might be facilitating a real kill chain, because let's face it, the last mile is kinetic. So my question to you, and again, basically I'm going to take it to you, is all this digital data needs some security. I'm not talking cybersecurity, but rather what secure innovations do you implement unclassified to take to our advantage against a peer and a near peer threat? How do you secure that innovation?
I think part of the information is making sure that the data that's being provided is trusted and that it's not been messed with in any way. And how do you ensure that the data is trusted? Second would be to ensure that we're at the right classification level and we're transparent, and that's up and down. So think about, we historically in space, and the chief has talked about this numerous times, we overclassify things. And in this kind of a digital environment, that is immediately an Achilles heel, because now you can't share it at the right level to do the right operations that you need to do. But security is important, and how do we share the data? Is the data being provided at the right accuracy level? So various sensors, just as we see in the intelligence community and other things, each piece of data coming in has a tag to it that says how accurate do we believe, or what is the percentage that we believe this is an accurate piece of data, or it's to a certain level of accuracy. And how do you quantify that in the tag and then display that in the machinery and display it to the operator to then either I'm going to use this piece of data and this piece of data to quickly come to a decision, or I'm not. So I think we've got to work through all of those things from a secure perspective to make sure it's tagged, it's discoverable, it has the right trust capabilities and classification. And then as the operator, giving them the opportunity to set the filters of what those need to be to make the decision to pass the information. So I agree, I'm all about mission defense teams. We absolutely have to have those as well. We have to have the information assurance and all the things that go in security. But again, software-based systems allow you to quickly respond to new threats in those security regimes from a cyber perspective as well. So, again, if an enemy creates a new malware or a new thing, if I am a software-driven organization that I can quickly change it, then I can immediately evolve and move. In some cases, some of our legacy systems are not as agile to be able to quickly respond when we have those cyber threats, because they're frankly on old software operating systems that are so old that the parts don't always exist anymore, and we have to go back and do some of that. I think where we're going now with software driven and continuing to modernize and move forward gives us way more security moving forward in this environment.
Kim, anything to add on that?
DeAnna said pretty much said it all. Certainly from an operations perspective, she hit the nail on the head. I guess what I would only add to that in terms of how we really are trying to build security in versus bolt it on. We always talk about that. I'll refer back to digital engineering. Another opportunity we have is we advance the digital engineering ecosystem and have ways to really model the threats, all domain threats, and think about threats in the cyber domain and what kind of capabilities we need to best defeat and deter those threats, and to do that in partnership with Cybercom and our other service partners that are also battling those threats. So modeling those kind of capabilities, thinking through that and working through that as we build out and deploy gives us another way to ensure the security is there when we need it. And then partnering, again, with our commercial partners. The supply chain is absolutely critical. And we know for a long time that the space defense supply chain has certainly been at risk. And we've got phenomenal industry partners that are working very closely with us, with our partners at SMC, in figuring out new ways to protect that supply chain, new ways to assess vulnerabilities and address them before they become problems. And we're going to continue to do that as we continue to work towards delivering innovation at the speed of need.
You know, when General Raymond gave his presentation for the first time, this was last year with the Air Force Association, he talked about coalition. So if you don't mind, I'm going to do a little change up with us because we need to now take joint and coalition into our conversation. The space race has become a far more complex since the days of the Cold War, especially due to the sheer scale of opportunities and emerging technologies. So let's not forget, our enemies are also working their digital capabilities as well. And this is definitely particular for global superpowers like the United States, Russia, and China. So what challenges does the digital transformation face with really kind of an indiscernible blending between all these commercial ventures that have potential military application? Because you're working in an AOR and may have to fight in an AOR that's just getting more crowded. Spice, can you tackle that one for us?
I think absolutely. We have to be understanding of, as Kim said, the vulnerabilities that are in the industrial base and where they are, and how do we team and partner with them to build that. The same with the coalition. Again, we come to the table with coalition partners and we talk very openly and honestly in an operation called Operation Olympic Defender, is an op org that's within U.S. Space Command that has operators on our ops floor at the TSSCI 5I level, and they're bringing capability to the fight and have agreed as a coalition to come to that, as have we. So I think on both sides of that, you have to be willing and to be open and transparent about, you know, warts and all. What are you bringing to the table? Where are you concerned? Where do you have vulnerabilities? And how do we work together to shore those up? But I would say, Doug, we can't let those things scare us or keep us from those capabilities. I think, again, it goes back to the OODA loop. How quickly can I change and evolve in the information age is going to be the person who wins, not the one who sits and hand wrings over, oh, this doesn't work and it's not perfect. That's who's going to lose. And that is so different than how we have fought in the past. And we have to get past that fear of the unknown, or the fear that, hey, it's not perfect. Well, no, it's not going to be, because we're going to continue to evolve. And that evolution actually makes it harder and makes us more secure to keep up with. It's when we're stagnant and we don't keep evolving that we make ourselves easier targets. So I just think overall, this mindset of change and move, and take in any bit of information you can, regardless of the source. But when you take it in, understanding, as I said, what is the trust of that data? How accurate is that data? And being able to then put it together in a picture of how I would make a decision. Everything's not going to be perfect. Everything is not going to be absolutely airtight, secure. But we will have enough resiliency that we will be able to overcome that, because we've chosen to take in more sources and we've chosen to put more information together. And so, yes, there are security problems and concerns, but I think the resiliency that the multitude of sources and opportunities with commercial and coalition bring us are by far outweigh that.
Kim, your perspective on coalition and bringing that together?
Critical. You know, partnerships are critical to everything that we do, and our coalition partners are really a key component to that. I guess I would add to what DeAnna just said, another important way that we are leveraging coalition is in our science and technology base. You know, we've got phenomenal S&T in this country, and our Air Force Research Lab partners and our other national lab partners, our commercial partners internal to the U.S. are doing some phenomenal things across, you know, all types of technology areas, not the least of which is the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Our coalition partners bring a lot to the table as well. They're innovating very quickly too, and they want to partner with us. We're actively engaging with them on new kinds of solutions, new kinds of approaches to apply those technologies in the space domain awareness arena in particular. As well as different ways to experiment with autonomy and servicing of space assets on orbit and verification and test. there's so many opportunities out there, and I think our coalition partners are eager and advancing in their own right, and we look forward to continuing to work with them.
Yeah, in Spites, I'm going to ask a question a little bit more broader, but I think it's important. This easy access to space has also triggered a kind of a middle power space race, and I'll define that. Let's not forget that there are 3 probes about ready to circle Mars. The Emirates, China, United States. The Emiratis are involved in this along with many other countries such as Turkey, South Korea, Iran. You know, and each country's space program has a heavy focus on dual use technologies. So I'm going to kind of come back because those dual use could be used for missile programs and defense industries. As a space component commander, you're trying to facilitate and monitor all this activity that has that. So can you kind of elaborate or just kind of give us some perspectives on how you help facilitate it, but also keep your mind on the operational arts?
No, absolutely. I think we have to be aware of everything that's out in the domain. And as you mentioned, many of our commuter peer competitors, as well as even those that you mentioned, the middle countries, tend to, you have to leverage because of the cost of entry into space has decreased. I mean, launch prices have gone down due to the number of commercial companies that are doing that, which is great for everyone to work in the domain. But it does allow other people entry who in the past probably have not been involved. There's also a lot of consortium and folks working together for building satellites together jointly in a coalition. Again, is that dual use? Is it military versus commercial? Again, even in the air domain, the FAA tracks everything that's in the air, regardless of whether it's commercial, military, or what it is. We have the same requirement in the space domain to track everything. We do recognize that a lot of things are dual use. I'll be quite frank, if you were to talk to us about commercial SATCOM, we use a lot of commercial SATCOM in the military for the Department of Defense. So it's not just the enemy that is relying on commercial. In some cases, we are too. Again, but I think we do that eyes wide open and we're much more transparent. But I think we're going to have to continue to track all those assets. We're going to have to continue to have the intelligence to understand what's on each satellite and what are they being used for. And it's, again, that compilation of information coming from the intel side of the house and how do you match that with the space picture of the things you are tracking to understand when they're in the right views or places that they could become targets or could become concerns. Those are all things that we continue to play on. I think over time, as we see Department of Commerce come on as the space traffic manager, just like the FAA does this for the air domain, you're going to see us be able to work in partnership with Department of Commerce, but really step back and be engaged purely in the military side of this. I don't think, just like in the Department of Defense on the Air Force side, we still care about what's in the air from a commercial perspective and to coexist in the domain with commercial and other actors. We're going to be the same way in the space domain. But again, the large part of that responsibility as Department of Commerce stands up and takes that on, we'll shift to them and we can step back and focus more on the military side of that. But we will always be engaged in that business and care about what's in the domain. But it is not easy to always understand what's commercial, what's military, and how do you, when they're dual use, how do we work that? So again, we track things. It's an intel process over time to understand how they're using those capabilities. And so again, it's back to the multi-domain. How do we use all aspects and all domains to gather that intelligence and work that? It's not going to just be tracking the vehicles and understanding what's there. It's also working through the intelligence side of the house about what they're seeing coming off of that satellite, who is using it, and how it's being applied. But it's definitely a growing market. It's an exciting time. I really resonate to your point. More exciting to me is the things going to the moon, the things going to Mars. I mean, it's just incredible what's exploded on the commercial side. I think space travel for the average person is slowly but surely coming. Going to London from California in a matter of an hour would be amazing. Those kinds of space travel, those kinds of things, even on our planet and to others, I think is going to be pretty exciting moving forward. And how do we as a Space Force and U.S. Space Command manage the tracking and support and defense of all those things that are U.S. flagship is going to be the challenges we look forward to in the next 20 to 30 years.
I can't wait to the day when you become the Space Deconfliction Authority for those events. We have about a minute or two remaining, and we've talked about the U.S. Space Force really being the digital pathfinder as a digital service born in this digital age. I think we've made strong emphasis. So, Kim, I'd like to hand it over to you for a final thought that you'd like to leave our audience.
Sure, thanks, Doug. Well, let me just emphasize again that, as we've talked about, adopting digital technologies is critical to the Space Force. As a small service, we need to be able to address the growing threat to space capabilities. And the best way we're going to do that is by leveraging digital methods, leveraging digital technologies that will give us speed and informed decision-making and stay ahead of our adversaries. So we're embarking on a digital transformation. We're born digital. We're starting off on the right foot, thinking differently, and applying those capabilities, building that competency as we go to speed our innovation. We've defined what it means to be a digital service. We're focused on digital operations, all the areas that we talked about, leveraging all domain data, integrating that into unified data library, making it available in multi-level secure cloud-based environments in our operations center and out to the warfighter edge. And ensuring the delivery of our services through ABMS and in support of JADC2. We're doing all that in our operations. We're doing it through digital engineering and the integrated thread from force design to capability development to systems engineering and ops and sustainment, to include test in our test ranges, also leveraging modeling-based systems engineering as we advance test and testing of those capabilities before we put them on orbit. And then when we get them on orbit and we integrate them with our ground systems, we have to be able to continue to advance and sustain them and modernize them. And what better way than to have digital representation and digital twins in order to do that very effectively and very securely so that we can actually communicate with those assets through our digital models and coordinate our digital solutions before we actually put those new capabilities back on orbit again. All of those things. We're doing it through our workforce, digital workforce and digital fluency and building those skill sets and advancing those guardians to be force multipliers in their own right, super coders that can develop on the floor, as well as in our headquarters operations and digitizing those headquarters processes that we need to be able to fight hard, as I said, in the bureaucracy where we live, many of us every day. So we've defined what that looks like. We're going to roll that out. I'll just give you a little teaser. We're going to roll that out in a vision document that's going to come out here shortly in the very near future. So I'm very excited about that. Look, our digital transformation is impacting every aspect of the Space Force mission. And we're excited to be part of that. We're excited to be helping to drive that. And we're excited to be supporting our warfighters out there across all of our operations.
Spice, last shot.
I just want to say thanks, sir, for your time today. This is an important topic, obviously, to the Space Force, but to the other services. And my closing would be, we're not going to do this alone. It's with our commercial, civil, coalition, and multi-domain partners that we're going to make this happen. Yes, the Space Force is born digital, but our hope is moving forward, because we're a small service, we can try some new things, show how they can be leveraged and hopefully upscaled to the other services and to our partners and out in industry where we can best do that. But it's an exciting time. I wouldn't trade for the world to be part of the Space Force and as we stand this up and where we're going, and it's pretty exciting. So fights on, Semper Supra.
Semper Supra.
Fantastic. Well, then, generals, I want to say thank you, because this, in my opinion, has been a delightful warfighting conversation. I want to thank you for joining us here at the Air Force Association's virtual Aerospace Warfare Symposium. Now, for our audience, thank you for tuning in to watch this panel on the U.S. Space Force, building the first digital service. Please be sure to check out the AFA's daily report for the latest coverage on the virtual Aerospace Warfare Symposium. And we also encourage you to join the fight as a member of the Air Force Association. Thank you.